How much weight are you losing when trimming a brisket? The ending might shock you. What's up guys, Kyle, You're Behind BBQ. Today, what we're going to do is how much weight are we truly losing after trimming a brisket? Let's find out. So before I start, I like to add my brisket to the freezer for about 45 minutes because I like it stiff. If you try trimming a brisket that is still in the refrigerator and still kind of cold, the fat becomes real jello-y and it's very hard to trim. So I like to set it in the freezer 45 minutes rather than having it, at room temp or in the refrigerator. So make sure you start with a sharp knife. I'm going to flip this over. Always open your brisket on the back end so you do not damage the front end of the meat or anything. You can damage the fat because we're trimming the fat anyways. So lay your brisket down. Total weight of this brisket was 16.01 pounds. So we're gonna trim off some of this and I wanna see exactly how much of a brisket I'm really cooking because we're not cooking the 16 pounds. So I'll pat it dry. Let's flip it over. And you can see this chunk here. I kind of like to put my hands in there. And I kind of like to feel this big old fat. Any hard fat like this fat won't render, so I'm gonna trim that off. And there's two important facts that I believe when cooking a brisket. One is the trim, and two is the resting of a brisket. If you nail those two, you're 80% there to cooking a perfect brisket. All right, so let's trim this fat off. Just this fat knuckle here. See, as you can see, it's all fat. So, all right, hard knuckles out. I'm gonna trim a little deeper here, kind of get rid of that. And I'm gonna just kind of look at it. There's this gray end here. Nobody wants to eat that, so I'm gonna trim that off. Trim this down, about 1/4 inch. Trim that down. Now, I want my brisket as aerodynamical as I can. And like I said, I'm always touching and feeling. And if there's any hard spots, I'm gonna trim that out because that's not gonna render down. And another thing too, if you don't spend time trimming your brisket, trimming the fat off, making it look good, when you pull it off the smoker and it's untrimmed and everything, you're still gonna have to carve it out on the cutting board to serve to people because nobody's gonna eat that. Okay, so we're gonna save these, save this big old pile here. And then I'm just gonna kind of aerodynamic it down a little bit. No sharp edges. You got sharp edges on a brisket, it's gonna crumble on the smoker when you go to slice it. You ever go to a barbecue restaurant in Texas or wherever you go to get brisket and they slice it and some of the ends crumble? Well, that's because they didn't make their brisket very aerodynamic and it got hot on the smoker and it crumbles. It crumbles when you slice the edges. So, cut that down. Okay, so then I'm just gonna take my knife and start cutting down some of the silver skin. Now, it's okay if you get a little bit of meat on there. It's all right because it's not going to waste. We're saving it. So, trim. Now, I'm not gonna be too worried about getting all of this. I'm just gonna get some of it because like I said, it's gonna render out. So we'll trim some of that. I just want to make it look pretty. Now, another trick is you will see one end of the brisket flat look pretty thick and the other end's going to be pretty thin. So you're not going to have a real even cooking. So this little end, this will curl up as it's cooking and it'll pool with juices here and it'll kind of ruin your seasoning, ruin your bark, ruin what you're going for. So I will go ahead and I will trim this thin piece off so we have even cooking. So basically just kind of round it out. Just round that out, no sharp edges. Okay, and this piece, I'm gonna just go on a diagonal, cut that down. So you got your flat, you got your point here. You can see this fat line here that goes like that, that separates the point and the flat. So I'm gonna just I kind of like this so far, but I don't like how it's not flat. There's a big hump here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to flip this over, and there's this little chunk of fat here, or, well, there's meat there, that's kind of holding it up a little bit. I'm gonna just trim that off. Like I said, I'm not throwing this away. These are nice little snacks for on the smoker. So I will trim that down. There's also this, they call it the mohawk, this thick little piece of fat here. You'll feel it. Just always play with your meat and feel it, and you will feel the hard fat, and you will know that is not going to render. So trim that down. Other than that, it looks pretty good. I'll run my knife here. You know, the fat, I can see the meat, so I'm not too worried about most of this fat. Some briskets you'll get, they'll have a big fat cap at the back of it. I want 1/4 of an inch of fat on the back side. So I'm not too worried about that. I think I want to trim this down a little bit. And see, you can see I'm kind of digging in the meat here. That's okay. As long as I get some of this fat out. Okay. Okay, the back I'm happy with, looks good. So we will turn this down here. There's a gash here from the butcher. That's okay. So now we're just going to go through, and we are going to make sure there's no sharp edges on this thing. Trim the fat. And then I'll just kind of rub it down. Yeah, it looks pretty good to me. Now, another cool trick is when you have this thing seasoned up and you're ready to go, goes on the smoker, comes off, it's wrapped, you're ready to serve, you don't know which way the grain is running. So when you're trimming, just look which way the grain is running, and then this corner piece, just trim it off. Trim off the corner so you know when you pull that out, this is where you will be slicing across the grain. So, you know, rub your meat, play with it, make sure you got no hard fat. This little spiky thing here is bothering me, so I'm gonna just go ahead and trim this down. Trim this down, get everything aerodynamic here. It's a good piece here. Let's trim this down. Okay, aerodynamic, she's looking good. Let's see, yeah, that looks good. Very aerodynamic. So, there you go, folks. That is the brisket trim. I know this seems like a real aggressive trim by taking that much fat, that much meat off, but you know, I promise you it's worth it, and you want the best results as possible. So if you want the best results possible, trim down your brisket, make it aerodynamic, put some love into it. You give this thing some love, it's gonna give you some love right back. So I'm very happy with the way it came out. Let's see how much it weighs. Remember, we started with 16 pounds. A whole packer brisket was 16 pounds. Now, after our trim, whew, she looks good. I like it. Sometimes I get yelled at saying, quit touching it, leave it alone, it's fine. So we're gonna leave it. So now, drum roll please. All right, now let's see how much this bad boy weighs. All right, after the trim, here we go, moment of truth. How much weight did we lose? We started with 16 pounds. We trimmed it up. Not competition style, we trimmed it backyard style. Very aerodynamic. We took off all the hard fat. Let's see how we did. Boom. 10 pounds. So we lost 6 pounds. We lost 6 pounds. Not bad. Not bad for a 16-pound brisket. A lot of the fat we are going to boil down and we are going to make beef tallow out of. A lot of the meat that we pulled off this thing, we are going to grind up. We're gonna make some killer sausage. We're gonna put it in our beans. We're also gonna add it to some stews. And some of the other meat, we're gonna make some brisket tacos. If you got valuable information from this video, please like, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that so you can see all the cool cooking videos we got coming up. Thanks. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, ring the bell so you don't miss a thing.